Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Between the Lines podcast. Been a long time, I guess you could say. Chris and I have been MIA. I mean, we've all got different schedules, so it's been hard to record lately. But we're back. Hopefully, we're going to be a little more consistent. Try and pump out more content. Um, and we got a lot to cover actually. Especially in the off season of the NFL, the main sport that Chris and I like to focus on. Holy crap, is all I could say. I mean, we're going to get right into it with one of the bigger headlines, and especially for Chris, considering he's a Jets fan. Justin Fields signed a contract with the Jets this past week, and Chris was very in favor of it. But I'm going to let Chris just take over, and then we're going to keep going back and forth on all these different contracts and trades and massive mega extensions on some of these non QB positions. So, Chris, take it away. Justin Fields to the Jets.
First off, it's good to be back recording. It's been
Yes.
a couple weeks, got a lot of stuff going on, different schedules, but on the bright side, that gives us a lot to talk about for, this week, the following week to catch up. Obviously, for me, the big news of the free agency cycle was the Jets signing Justin Fields, which I don't want to toot my own horn, but I said that like 2 months ago on the
Yes, you
podcast
did.
that even during the season, I said that I think that would happen as a real possibility. Um, I like it. Pretty cheap money when you think about like what starting quarterbacks getting paid these days. 2 years, 40 million, only 30 million guaranteed. So, it's essentially like a 1 year deal because if it really doesn't work, they can cut them with minimal dead money next year. I like it. I mean, it's more inspiring an option than like signing Kirk Cousins if he had been cut, or Mariota,
Yes,
or
I
Carson
agree.
Wentz, or any of those guys where like you kind of know what you're gonna get. Justin Fields definitely has potential that we haven't seen put together on a consistent basis yet. I think it's safe to say when he plays, he's the best athlete on the field at any given time, just as far as what he can do with his legs and just his athleticism. So if you could take that and, just advance the passing and, maybe the cerebral part of his game just a little bit, then I think you have a solid quarterback. Obviously, that's a big ask because, the mental and the throwing is obviously the biggest aspects of being a quarterback. But, there are times where we've seen Justin Fields flash and, specifically at the end of his time with the Bears. A lot of them didn't wanna a lot of their fans didn't really wanna give up on him. I think that most people realize he's crazy talented and, the Bears
Yeah.
didn't really do anything to support him as far as coaching and drafting. Um, and then, the Steelers kind of pulled the rug out from under him when he was, 5-2, 4-2 as a starter and benched him. Um, which actually I actually saw something today is because like, there was a playing time incentive on his contract where their draft pick that they gave up to the Bears would have gone from a 6th rounder to a 4th rounder, and they probably were just like, "Yeah, let's just put in Russ, like, we can't be our offense can't be much worse, and maybe we'll win some more games and save the draft pick," which, that very well could be what happened there, going to Russ, but yeah, no, long story short, I'm fine taking essentially a 1 year flyer on him. He'll play this year as the starting quarterback. And if they're really bad, they're going to be picking high again and, have a
Yeah.
chance to draft a quarterback in a better class compared to this year where I really did not want to reach for like Jackson Dart or give up assets for one of the other guys, honestly. So I'm good with this. I just, keep building out the offense. It seems like they're going to have to be a run first team just based on the personnel. That brings up a couple different guys in the mock drafts, like Tyler Warren or Armand Membu. I'd say those are probably the two biggest guys right now. But
Mm.
for now, yeah, I'm for Justin Fields, and yeah, I'm rooting like hell for him.
Well, it's interesting you brought up like the kind of like, what kind of quarterback you could have signed in free agency, Chris, because everybody in the offseason is always looking for okay, who's gonna have that Baker Mayfield with the Buccaneers or Sam Darnold with the Vikings kind of season, like that kind of comeback redemption thing. And I think Chris nailed it on the head in terms of a guy that did and team in terms of a fitting team that would need that kind of redemption arc. Fields. Not going to say he has like 40 total touchdowns, but he might have 30 total, and he might have 8 picks at most or something like that. Like that's the kind of season I could see him having. And like Chris said, they're going to be a run first team. I mean, him and Brees that read option, Chris talked about that RPO option too. Is going to be nice. It's going to be really deadly if they can, solidify that offensive line. So I'm in terms of all the free agent quarterbacks we've seen that have, that aren't in terms of the quarterbacks that aren't exactly as talented or promising, or have shown that they can be a long time starter. Fields is the most exciting to me because he's young, like Chris and his athleticism. So I think the Jets made an excellent move here. They're gonna have a guy that is looking for that kind of redemption arc that we've seen many years. Geno Smith with the Seahawks as well. It always happens one year to some guy. He just comes out of the blue and is like, wow, he really cleaned himself up and all that stuff. So we're looking for Fields to do that because really, I mean, Chris nailed it on the head. This guy's been phenomenal for in college, and he's shown a lot of promise in the league. It's just a matter of giving him the right chance. So I think if anything, it's going to happen with the Jets next year. But sticking with quarterbacks, we had that QB carousel happen, trades, free agency, whatever you want to say. But um, something that really stood out to me, Chris, was the whole thing with the Seahawks completely revamping their offense, or not, I guess revamping, but remodeling. You guess you could say. The start off happened, I believe, was it Gino? Gino was the first trade. Was it
Yeah,
DK? Gino went to the
Gino.
Raiders. Gino got sent to the Raiders, so he's reunited now with Pete Carroll on Vegas. For the Seahawks, did I expect it? Maybe not. I expected another guy getting traded who actually did end up getting traded, which is DK Metcalf. But with Gino, I think he's like 33 now or something like that, 32. He's like young 30s. So he could have a couple solid years left in him. But especially for a team like Vegas, not bad, I guess you could say. I mean, Gino has been solid for the past couple of years, but you know, Chris always mentioned the possibility of the Raiders taking Genti now in the draft. I think with the addition of Gino, that is probably going to happen unless we see some crazy trade up for Shador or Cam Ward. But I think the Raiders just made a statement that they're going to stick with Gino for the next couple of years and feed guys like Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers and draft a guy like Genti to make that a super offense.
The problem is they play in such a loaded division that Geno Smith
Hmm.
really doesn't move the needle in terms of their ceiling. Like in your division, like you're looking at 6 games where you're not going to be favored on your schedule. With
Yeah,
like I could tell you that with absolute certainty right now, they won't be favored in any of those games against the Chargers, Chiefs, or Broncos.
I
So even
agree.
if you go 1-5 in those games or 2-3, like it's really going to be hard for them to make up ground in the AFC and snag a playoff spot. They just have so little talent on both
Yeah,
sides of the ball, and no disrespect to Gino, he's a very solid NFL quarterback. I just doesn't really move the needle, and this is almost like what the Steelers kind of have been dealing with, where like they're half decent but never bad enough to get the first pick or a top pick and kind of work on rebuilding. The Raiders get a lot of picks, but they don't draft well. And then this year they have a new regime and picking 6 in a class that's not great. So I don't mind the move for Gino, if this team was a little more well-rounded, but long term, but it's twofold because long term, stay the process, keep as many assets as you can,
right.
and draft and develop. But when you sign 78-year-old Pete Carroll to be your head coach, there's no time. He's very, I'll put it blunt, he signed a 3-year contract because he's extremely old and they don't have, 4 years to start adding to this roster. The expectation rational or not in
Win
Vegas is
now.
going to be to win now and probably to make the playoffs, which I
Yeah.
don't see happening.
Yeah. But let's look at the other side now, Chris. I mean, so Seahawks lose their quarterback. Um, DK Metcalf gets sent to the Steelers on a crazy trade that actually I guess it's not crazy because he was on the market for a little bit because he wanted to go to a winning team. A team that I was looking at was the Patriots before he said all this, because we all know that they needed. I obviously they need offensive line, but they need a number one for Drake May to develop. I immediately crossed that team off the list, and lo and behold, he goes to Pittsburgh to pair up with George Pickens, who now also don't have a quarterback. But the Seahawks get rid of DK and now land on a 3-year deal over $100 million for Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold leaves the Vikings and comes to Seattle with now a team that also got rid of Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Chris, what do you think about Sam Darnold? Because it's Seattle.
Well, first off, to your first point about the Patriots, I think their problem is going to be attracting talent because
Mm,
you've heard DK Metcalf say that playing in New England is pretty much like playing in Buffalo. People only go to play in Buffalo because of Josh Allen. If he
right.
wasn't there, they'd have a similar problem. The Northeast is not a very desirable uh, place
Location.
to play for, a lot of these athletes. The taxes are high, the weather's not good, and the Patriots aren't good right now. It's not like
Right.
even when they had Tom Brady, like Randy Moss was really only like the superstar receiver that they had during his time there for the most part. Um, I think that's just going to be something that the Patriots are going to have to deal with. Is overpaying to get talent, and we kind of saw that with how they decided to spend their money. Um, I don't think they spent it very well in free agency when you're handing out like if you think about there's always these graphics that come out of the teams that spend the most in free agency, and it's
Yeah.
over the last 5 years it's like the Jets, the Jaguars, the Giants, and the
Yeah.
Raiders or something like that. Like I know the Jets are on there, and those teams stink because you
Mhm.
can't build a team in free agency.
Right.
Good teams supplement in free agency with value contracts like Zach Bond, for example, going to Philly on a 1 year and
Yeah.
he becomes an all pro, or and Mekhi Becton has a really good year and they win the Super Bowl. It's stuff like that. It's not giving 4 years to Harold Landry, whose best days are behind him, or 3 years to Morgan Moses, whose shoulder is pulled pork, to be honest with you. And it's not giving money to all these different guys like Carlton Davis, who's played, double digit games like once the last couple years. I don't think he's ever played a full season. He's always hurt. I don't agree with the strategy, but they have all this money
Yeah.
and they kind of have to push the chips in now. That's more my point. But I don't this wasn't a good free agency class. Like if you notice, like I think the biggest indicator of how weak this class is how the Eagles have been operating because
Right.
they just won the Super Bowl and they have a really good team. You would think that they'd, push the chips in and go for it again and try to get another one with this team. But no, no, they've been cutting payroll a little bit. They let
Yeah.
Becton go. Um, they let Sweat go.
They
They
lost
let
like six
they,
guys.
they traded Gardner Johnson. They
Yeah.
lost Slay. They lost Bradbury, and they're kind of sitting this one out and they have 12 draft picks next year, and they're just going to go full throttle next year in 2026 and probably be back in the Super Bowl in one of the next 2 years. But
Yeah.
that was way off. I don't even remember your original question. You wanted to hear about DK?
DK and Sam Darnold. But you made great points, Chris. I mean, the Patriots are looking to just they think they can grab a couple pieces in free agency and become a playoff team, which is not at all how it works. And you make a great point about the Eagles. I mean, they literally gave up, I'd say, like 6 starters, basically, or at least just of their solid players in free agency and trading this offseason. And like you said, they have 12 draft picks. Howie Roseman hits the nail on the head almost every pick he's had as an Eagle. Like I can't remember. Like a lot of these guys have turned out to be very, very solid players, at least in the early rounds. I mean, um, he's spending his money well too. I mean, he went out and got being a Giants fan, I like him a lot. Azeez Ojulari, another Georgia defensive end. Yeah, he's injury prone a lot, but you give him a 1 year flyer, right? You need this that's a cheap contract for a guy that has a lot of potential. So the risk is low, the reward is high. You know what I mean? That's the kind of strategy that Howie Roseman plays, and it's genius, and you have to give him his props. But yeah, going back to free agency and stuff, Chris, just with Seattle remodeling their offense, right? So they lose DK and add Sam Darnold. What's the thought process there, right? I mean, do they just is it just they're thinking younger quarterback, and move DK to save money and don't have to pay like a mega contract and they lose Tyler Lockett. So what's your thought process on that, Chris? Before I jump in on it.
Well, I had read that Geno Smith wanted a contract extension, and Seattle wasn't really interested in dealing with that. So I guess, that's the obvious move is to get rid of him while you can and go out and sign
Smart.
his replacement in Darnold, which, I like Sam Darnold, obviously. He was the Jets
Yeah.
quarterback, but um, he's kind of really flopped at the end of the year, but I still think they can be a decently competitive team with him and adding Cooper Cup to go with Smith and Jigba and Kenneth Walker if he ever stays healthy and Zach Charbonnet. Like that's a pretty decent core. Like
Yeah.
it could, the NFC is a really tough conference, but teams have down years. Like the 49ers, I think are going to take a huge step back next year. I know they weren't good
Yes.
this year, but I'm expecting another down year for them. And the Cardinals, they're never really that great. So their division is certainly, I'll say winnable, even though I think the Rams are probably going to win that division. I don't really get why they didn't pay DK if it was about the money because he only got 30 million a year. That's like market value.
Yeah.
If he truly didn't want to be there, then that's fine. They got a second round pick, which is pretty much that's what they put into him. He was a second round draft pick. They got back what they put in, so it's not horrible value. But you know, I don't know if I love the fit in Pittsburgh because we don't know who their quarterback is, and even if
Yeah.
it is Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson, that feels like a one-year solution. So I just don't really get it from Pittsburgh's perspective. We've been saying for a while they need to, rebuild a little bit and retool, but this is a win now move. So, and they play in a division where Baltimore is always going to be a top seed.
Yep.
Cincinnati
Cincinnati
should be better next year. I mean, their defense is non-existent, but they have the ability to give you 40 points in any game. And, no one is expecting much out of the Browns, but I'm not too sure if I like the move for Pittsburgh.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the worst idea to get another weapon and kind of, I guess, make George Pickens the wide receiver too. But going back to your point of QB, Chris, I mean, maybe Darnold was the option for Pittsburgh. A guy like he's pretty young. Give him a decent contract just to give him a chance. This whole Rodgers drama is just annoying to me, especially as a Giants fan, because I'm just sitting here waiting to see what happens with him so I can see if we get him or Russell Wilson. And just looking at the circumstances of what Rogers is looking for over 30 million a year. Like if I'm the Giants, I ignore him and I just take Russ on a cheap contract because we know we're going to be bad next year. We're going to be bad for the next couple of years. If you want to take a flyer on one of these QBs, you take Russ. It's a cheap contract. Maybe get a quarterback in the second round. If you want to pick Shador third overall, go for it. But there's just to me, there's no point in signing a guy like Rodgers. But yeah, I could definitely see him owing to Pittsburgh though, Chris. And I don't know if it's bold of me to say, but like we talked about Rodgers' stats last year, he wasn't terrible. Okay, he wasn't god awful. The biggest struggle with him was he held the ball for so long. If he goes back to throwing that quick release constantly to guys like Pickens and Metcalf, I mean that's not a bad offense when you think about it. So I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are the best option for Rodgers, and but like Chris said, that's short term. I mean, Pittsburgh probably competes maybe next year for a wild card spot. Um, TJ Watt's not getting any younger either. That defense is solid, but how many more years are you gonna waste on these guys? But I can honestly, Chris and I have talked about this. I could definitely see them sign Rodgers and make some trade, or somehow they get Jackson Dart in the draft and have him sit behind Rodgers for a year and then just move on right to him, which isn't a bad option either. But it's just crazy how much value there is in quarterbacks in terms of the draft. And, one QB needy team, one or two QB needy teams come out and they're like, a guy that was projected for the third round, second round in Jackson Dart might become a top 15 pick now, just for the pure fact of a team needing a quarterback. Not to degrade Jackson Dart in any way. I mean, he's actually had a solid combine. He's shown great characteristics and quality of a leader and a quarterback. So I give him respect, but a first round pick is significantly different to a second round pick. Um, but I think Dart can be successful in the league. He has all the tools, like I mentioned. He's got a great arm, so we'll see what happens there. But Pittsburgh wouldn't be a bad spot for him. But like Chris said before as well, Pittsburgh always puts themselves in a pickle because they'll never get a high pick. So it's like they have to now trade or whatever, right? If they trade, or they have to lose out on purpose or something. I don't know, but I like the move of Sam Darnold for Seattle for the pure fact that they just got a younger quarterback. Uh, People forgetting Sam had like 36 touchdowns last year. He kind of did struggle in the playoffs and the last couple of games of the season, especially that last one against Detroit. But he shows promise. And Seattle, a solid veteran receiver in Cooper Cup now recruited. And Jackson Smith and Jigba is a guy I love. I think he's just a very shifty slot guy, I guess you could say, similar to Cooper Cup. Put him anywhere on the field. So Seattle could definitely get creative, but like Chris said with the run game too, I mean, you got to use guys like Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker, just utilize the run because I think that would make Darnold's passing game more deadly. So I think Seattle, out of all these teams, had a very, very solid offseason so far. I'm looking for them to add either a piece of that line or just another defensive pick maybe for the draft. But it'll be very interesting what Seattle's offense looks like, which is entirely revamped now. Um, I do want to bring up a couple of receivers now, Chris. We did talk about DK and Cup, but Devontae Adams went to the Rams now. So Devontae Adams was that first piece of that, though. It was that little rotation of the Steelers, Rams, and Seahawks, right? So and Jets, obviously. So Adams goes to the Rams. Rams release Cup. Cup goes to the Seahawks, and DK gets traded to the Steelers. Does Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua and Matt Stafford seem more dangerous to you, Chris, than DK Metcalf, George Pickens, and Aaron Rodgers?
Yes,
Yeah,
without thinking twice.
yeah,
I'm glad that Devonte Adams, like, is, unattached himself from the idea of having
Rodgers.
to play with Aaron Rodgers because Devonte
Yes.
Adams is still an incredibly productive player who could serve well on any playoff team. I think it makes the Rams offense that much dangerous. They're definitely going to be a top seed in the NFC next year, in my opinion. They
Yeah.
took Philly down to the wire in a snowstorm this year, and you just added a very good receiver. Devontae Adams had like 900 yards and like 7 touchdowns with the Jets in his short time there. Um, he's still really good. What it does obviously is takes away some attention from Puka, and now teams will kind of have to pick their poison because you
Yeah.
have Kyron Williams to deal with. Maybe Blake Corum comes on a little bit this year, and then you have a decent tight end room with Higbee and Parkinson. And the strength of their team last year for a lot of the season was their defensive line, and we
Yeah.
saw it against Philly. They were just getting
Jared
after
Verse.
Jalen Hurts,
Yeah.
and Minnesota the round before verse Kobe
Yes.
Turner, Braden Fisk, all those guys. I think they're gonna be really good, and it's a short deal for Adams, so, you didn't
Right.
lock him up until he's, like, 36, he's only, like, 32 right now, and he still has his legs, his route running is elite, and obviously he's still got the hands.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, talking about teams that he could have gone to, I think he probably went to the best fit for him. I mean, who knows how to utilize a wide receiver more than Sean McVay? We saw what Cooper Cup did a couple years ago with the Triple Crown. I'm not saying that Adams going to have that kind of year, but McVay is so intelligent with where to put a receiver and how to just get him into a soft spot. I mean, even if you don't want to rely on Devontae Adams' one-on-one ability, the dude runs every single route perfectly. So I think McVay just got probably one of the more dangerous weapons he's had in his career as a head coach. I mean, besides Cooper Cup, maybe. But like Chris said, I mean, Stafford staying with the Rams was a great idea for both sides. Um, I think McVay is too smart to get rid of a gunslinger like that. I think Matt Stafford's one of the last few of that, gunslinger in the pocket kind of quarterback style. So I think that the Rams offense will be absolutely dangerous next year. And Chris already talked about their defense being one of the focal points, especially that front seven of that team last year, being one of the big reasons why they were going far in the playoffs. So yeah, I could definitely see veterans like Stafford and Adams maybe making a run and possibly getting a ring before another ring for Stafford at least before they retire. This would be huge for them. Maybe gets Aaron Donald out of retirement or something like that. I don't know. This would,
Imagine.
could you imagine? He actually, no, maybe he won't. That sounds crazy. But
No, he's done. Yeah,
yeah,
he's
he's probably
done.
done. But that would be funny. Now speaking of contracts and extensions and stuff, something very interesting. Actually, hold on. Before I go on to that, Chris, I want to talk about this real quick as a Giants fan. Daniel Jones signed a contract with the Colts. Now, for a guy like Anthony Richardson, he better look at this and laugh. No disrespect to Daniel Jones or whatever. I mean, I'm not trying to be, but Daniel Jones is not good. Okay. And I'm going to say that in the most respectful way possible. He has not had success in the NFL, in my opinion. And I'm a Giants fan. Even with the playoff win, doesn't matter. He had a great game that game. That was it. Um, this is like the lowest bar you could set for Anthony Richardson. And I think it's very smart for the Colts to bring in a guy like Daniel Jones. Because you have two stories here. Daniel Jones goes, okay, I'm getting a chance to win the starting job for the Indianapolis Colts. This is my redemption arc. Okay, if that happens, good for you, Daniel. Hopefully, maybe I'm not going to say he'll have a. We talked about Sam Darnold redemption or whatever, Baker Mayfield redemption. Maybe that happens, maybe that doesn't, whatever. This is to show Anthony Richardson, hey, this is what we're comparing you to right now. If you can't get over this bar, you're done. This is probably his last chance, in my opinion. I don't know what you think of this, Chris, but I want your opinion on it in a second. But Richardson has to, number one, beat Daniel Jones in a QB battle. Number two, go out and actually perform. I'm not saying he's gonna be Superman like Cam Newton or Josh Allen or whatever this upcoming year, but he's got to have a decent season and stay healthy in order for the Colts to say, okay, you're good, because he might get traded as well eventually, Anthony Richardson, and Daniel Jones gets a spot, or they trade or whatever and get a draft pick or something like that. Because I liked Anthony Richardson a lot. I banked on him huge last year for especially in fantasy football for redraft leagues. The pure fact of why am I forgetting his name? The Eagles coach who went there to become their head coach. Why am I forgetting his name? Yes,
Steichen.
Steichen was the guy who helped develop Jalen Hurts. So I saw similar characteristics with Richardson, and probably even a little more athletic with Richardson. But it just didn't pan out the way I was expecting, and many didn't expect it to be that bad. But this is it for him, in my opinion, Chris.
He just really hasn't been that good, honestly.
Yeah.
He probably shouldn't have played last year, or I guess 2 years ago now, because he'd only had like 12 collegiate starts under his belt
Yeah.
when they threw him into the NFL. And he clearly wasn't ready mechanically. He definitely had the talent. It's just NFL is just a whole different game compared to college. And for him, it was almost like going from high school to the NFL with how little experience he had in college. And I don't. Daniel Jones isn't really like intense competition. Like, sure, he's
It's not competition at
been a,
all.
s- a s- I mean, he's been a starter in this league for 6, 7 years. So there, and he's still obviously it's not like a veteran journeyman quarterback who's just kind of it's not really a competition. Like
Right.
Daniel Jones will have every opportunity to win this job, but um, I don't know. It doesn't. Anthony Richardson's future in Indy doesn't look good either way, in my opinion.
What happens though, Chris? Like, what happens to a guy like that? Because what if Jones? I'm not saying he will, but okay, Jones, let's say outperforms him. Do the Colts just like what's his value at for a trade? Then I mean, do the Colts just drop him? There's no
I mean, we
way.
saw we saw Justin Fields get traded for a sixth, so
Good
it's got
point.
to be in that ball. It's got to be in that ballpark, and I would think that some teams probably had a higher value on Justin Fields than what Anthony Richardson has shown to this point. You
Yeah,
know, he's
good
been
point.
wildly inconsistent and hasn't really developed at all in these 2 years. Plus, he's been benched. So, not all of it is
Yeah,
his fault. Their coaching staff is not very good. Steichen is probably not good. Um, their GM has been there forever, and they've been pretty mid. So it's not
yeah,
all his fault, but he hasn't been good enough.
yeah. I agree. I just want to talk about that because of Daniel Jones, and I do agree with the points of like I've seen on social media. The points that I made as well about him being like the lowest bar for Richardson. It's kind of for the Colts to just be like, okay, let's see if he can like Richardson can actually beat this guy. Because if he can't, then there's a problem. Um, again, no offense to Daniel Jones. But the main thing I wanted to talk about now is the non QB contracts and how much it just exploded in the past, what, week and a half, maybe. We start off with Max Crosby. Um, and quite frankly, I think Chris, you said something that he was going to get a bag, or maybe it was Miles Garrett. We'll talk
There's
about next.
Garrett.
It was
Yeah.
Garrett. With Crosby, I was expecting him to be moved. Actually, I didn't expect him to stay in Vegas. But I mean, Chris made great points. If you want to make them real quick, Chris, about these two defensive ends that were kind of on the trade block.
I mean, money always talks. They can
Yeah.
demand as much of a trade as they want, but it's hard to turn down, $200 million when it comes across your
Right.
table as a defensive lineman. I think Crosby is. I don't think he ever wanted to leave Vegas. I think he's very loyal to them and what they've had going on there. But
Yeah.
like I said before, they've really shown no signs of improvement or that, they have the right idea of how to build a team. But, they gave him a ton of money, and rightfully so. He's a really good defensive lineman. It's hard to let talent walk out the building. Sometimes, like I think in that situation, you might be better off moving him and rebuilding, but obviously that's not what they're looking to do, right? We talked
No,
about they went out and got Gino, which is a win now move. So they're clearly trying to make the playoffs. But for the Browns, if I was the Browns and Miles Garrett demanded a trade, it's tough, and the fan base wouldn't like it, but I probably would have moved them
I would
for
have done it
like
too, Chris. Yeah, I was gonna say that.
multiple first round picks and
Yeah.
later picks. I think the price for Miles Garrett starts at 2 first round picks, and
Yeah.
then everything else you get is just kind of a bonus.
Yeah. Just becomes
And
a
for a
bidding war.
team that's, they have so much money and guarantees committed to Deshaun Watson, who's not going to play this year, and now you're giving 40 million a year to a defensive end, and you just have no talent on the team, and it looks like they might draft a quarterback. I don't really know. They might draft Abdul Carter, but I would have thought this would be the perfect way to kick off a rebuild by trading Myles Garrett
Yeah.
and really acquiring a lot of assets. Now you're just kind of going to be stuck paying him a lot. He's a great player, but they're not going to win anything. So he doesn't really serve any value to them other than, he's the fans' favorite player.
Yeah. I agree with you, Chris. I feel like they could have got like I can't even put a number to it besides just a minimum of two firsts. They could have got a lot more than just the two firsts for Garrett, considering it would have gone to a bidding war. I mean, it could have been a win-win for for whatever organizations, because whatever team traded for him would have been a contender in the next couple of years. And we know for a fact that the Browns would have gotten like the rest of that team's future for the next like 2 years or something like that. Um, so yeah, it as nice as it is to see him get that money, it's also disappointing as a football fan because he would have looked disgusting on one of these other contending teams. It would have been one of those great moves to make as like, maybe the Packers, maybe the Chargers. I don't know. I'm just throwing out random names that are like these middle of the ground teams that need that little extra oomph. I mean, this guy is a depoy player. I mean, he's probably a top three game wrecker in terms of the defensive side of the ball. I mean, fair play to the Browns for locking him up. But like Chris said, same thing for the Raiders. Both of these teams just gave like it was crazy. Crosby became the highest non QB paid ever, right? And then a couple days later, Garrett follows up with it. Both same position, completely resetting the market. I mean, maybe not resetting the market, but changing the market of defensive ends for a while now, and that's great for them. But like Chris said, what else? What was the process, right? What else is going on around these organizations now that shows okay, we got our best player now on defense, and we're not going to do anything else now, right? You invested all your time and money into those guys, and that's it. And everything's been the same for the past couple of years with those guys. So what happens now, right? And co- Going on to this next guy, who now is the highest non QB paid ever in NFL history, which is Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, both getting huge contracts. Two wide receivers getting massive contracts from the same team to stay together. Chris and I have talked about the Bengals quite often here. The Bengals quite literally don't have a defense. They have a special teams and they have an offense. They don't have a defense right now. I can't put that on paper because they don't have anybody. They lost Hendrickson, I believe, was no, who retired? It was Hubbard. Hubbard retired. And
Yeah,
Hendrickson
Hubbard.
is Hubbard, sorry. Hendrickson's probably gone too now.
I don't
Um
know. It sounds like they're trying to, walk that back and maybe extend him. For now,
so what was the whole point of that though? That was crazy.
he wants a new contract.
That's fair,
Same
but
deal as
anyway, Chase $40 million. I believe Higgins around 29 or 30, Chris, and he's in 30.
Higgins is like 28 and a half.
Right now, Chris and I are talking about this a little, but I'll have Chris go first before I say anything. Chris, go ahead.
I mean, it's kind of that it's hard. It's a hard move to sell to the fans, not keeping those players, fan favorites. Obviously Jamar Chase, you don't have a choice. You have to keep him. But like I don't paying two receivers like
70
$60 million a
mil,
year annually.
70.
Yeah, like 70, that's just like ludicrous. And T. Higgins, like I don't he's really good, but he's never healthy. He
Yeah,
never plays a full season. We've seen numerous instances where you can find value later in the draft with receivers like Puka Nacua.
yeah,
I think that's the best recent example. Um, like Stephon Diggs was like a fifth round pick. Like you don't have to be a top 45 pick to be a very good wide receiver. But I don't know. T. Higgins gets paid like, a fringe wide receiver one, and
yeah.
that's just not what he is for the Bengals. He's a wide receiver too. I just don't think it's smart to allocate, like a third of your cap to your quarterback and two receivers when you've addressed nothing on your defense that's been horrible, and you could use some offensive line help.
Yep. I mean, the thing is with T is part of me thinks he could have got more somewhere else, Chris. Maybe like a couple extra mil more. So maybe he also I guess he just also wanted to stay. No, I mean, that's got to be the
Yeah,
thing
it's
that's going through
possible.
my mind because it's like he could have gone. I mean, obviously we talked about it, Chris just talked about it now too with the Patriots. I mean, the Patriots probably would have paid him buttloads to come and be their number one receiver. Again, we obviously don't know anything, but I'm saying like he definitely wants to stay there. But like Chris said, you have a wide receiver one and a wide receiver two on your team, and they're both getting paid wide receiver one money. And now, what do you expect Joe Burrow to do? Throw the ball 65 times a game? Like Joe Burrow might be the first QB to get Tommy John or something like that. Like it's gonna be it's bad. It's really bad to invest all this into three guys basically. And yeah, they are phenomenal together. They're absolutely amazing, but there are other aspects of football that you need to, especially from what the Bengals did last year, literally go like proving exactly what we were thinking last year is they had no defense and they had T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow, and that was it. And they had basically what was it like they were right above 500, I believe. So and they barely edged out some of these games. So yeah, it's good for them. but T. Higgins definitely could have gotten a chance to be a number one somewhere else, and gotten pretty big money. Like Chris said, though, you have to lock up guys like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. I mean, that's the duo that will retire Bengals basically. But yeah, I agree with Chris. I think that money could have got invested somewhere else. But just the fact that Chase now is the highest paid non QB is also amazing to me. I mean, the fact that it literally went from it like three guys took the crown within the past week and a half just shows that the NFL is becoming, probably the most expensive sport. I mean, at least eventually will be, in my opinion. Um,
I don't know if it's gonna pass baseball just because of
True,
they don't
good
have a
point.
salary cap and they play
Good
more
point.
games, but I know
Um,
what point you're trying to make.
but yeah, I mean, free agency's been crazy this year. I don't know. I don't know. The free agency has affected my draft process now, Chris. When we do our mock draft, that like I need to rethink all of it again because I'm looking at our mock draft now and I'm like, there's no way this team will take that. There's no way. Like I had the Steelers taking a receiver at first, and now I'm like, there's no way. So yeah, I mean, we didn't even pick a guy like Jackson Dart in our mock, our first round. I mean, obviously we probably see it happening. Um, but like now, I feel like it's definitely happening, and Jackson Dart's going in the first round, probably the top half of the first round, in my opinion, at least. So I don't know. It's very interesting to see. I like guys like Debo Samuel got. I mean, obviously Debo, Chris and I have different opinions. I mean, I guess maybe not different opinions, but opposing. I don't know. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but like a guy like Debo's a guy who had many great years, and now he's on. He got traded for really cheap to Commanders, who need another weapon for Terry McLaurin, for Jaden Daniels. So I think that's good value as well. Like, there's so many little trades that happened here and there that it's just there's so much that happened this offseason that I can't even process.
But even yesterday, Stingley signed a massive extension and like reset the cornerback market
Yeah.
to over
Oh,
$30
that
million
was huge. Yeah, talk about this,
annually.
Chris. Yeah. I forgot about this.
I mean, I don't know if I would have paid Stingley 2 years early when he's only had one productive year or really productive year, but you know, teams are going to reward their players. It's not going to last long because Sauce Gardner is going to get more whenever he gets paid, whether that's in the summer or
Right.
next off season, whenever they choose to have that, he'll get paid more. I think he was going to get more regardless. Like, I think he was going to get 30 million yesterday. I think he was going to get 30 million today, whenever it happened. That's just kind of how I viewed it. But yeah, I don't really know why there was such a rush to extend Stingley for them. He's only been in the league 3 years, and they only signed him for 3 years. So that takes him to his age 28 season where he can then, obviously sign again as a free agent. But yeah, I don't think that the other teams are a big fan of Texans doing that, but to each their own, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Stingley had, Chris said, solid year last year, but he's still on his rookie contract, and he has 1 year and he becomes the highest paid. I mean, it's just wild to me. But you know, what's interesting to me is other contracts and stuff like for fantasy, Chris. Like I love looking at it from like a fantasy standpoint. Like Evan Ingram to the Broncos to me, like as a guy for a tight, like if you want a tight end later on, like I love that because I think the Broncos used a tight end so well in their offense last year that Evan Ingram is just that receiver tight end hybrid. Like Najee Harris to the Chargers is very underrated. Like I'm not saying these guys should become the best in their positions or whatever. I'm just saying like for value of fantasy, like underrated guys. I mean that our Chargers line is disgusting. So having a guy like Najee behind there is kind of nice too. He'll be I kind of see like a David Montgomery kind of vibes where he'll just load up on touchdowns or like Jamal Williams kind of season. Um, I don't know. It's just fun to look at this stuff from a perspective as just a fan. Like, um, even as a Giants fan, I was so happy to get a Debo from the Saints. I mean, it wasn't a very expensive contract, but he's a guy that has proven himself to be a great corner one. But as long as he stays healthy, at least. If we want to talk about the corner market, but also Javon Holland. I mean, for the Giants, he's 25-year-old safety who paid, I believe his contract is about half of what Xavier McKinney's is. I'm not saying McKinney's bad or on the same level as him. McKinney's way better than Holland, but just in terms of revamping that secondary and euthanizing it. There's a,
Euthanizing.
yeah, I just used the word completely incorrect, but it's okay. Euthanizing.
I
We're gonna
don't
say
know.
euthanizing.
Euthanize? No, that's not
It's
the right
okay. We're gonna
word.
say it. Say it anyway, Chris. It's okay. No, you
Um,
making my secondary younger. Let's call it that. Uh,
sure.
I like Holland. I like Adebo, and I'm excited for the Giants in terms of their defense. I mean, maybe hopefully we could actually be solid for once. But I have nothing else to say in terms of free agency. Chris, if you got anything else you want to go over?
I mean, the Giants should be better defensively. It just their offense needs a
I
lot of
agree.
work.
Oh, 100%,
So,
Chris. It's gonna be
I
terrible.
don't think, but I don't think that Shane and Brian Dable are going to be around to see it come to fruition. I think it's gonna, if they have success in the future, it'll be someone else dealing with it.
Interesting. Very interesting. I mean, I would say in terms of the two, I like Dable more. I think Shane has already lost his job. I mean, at least he lost the fans already for sure. Um, Dable has shown great qualities though, so we will see what happens with that. Chris, you have any other comments to make before we end the episode?
And there's so much that happened that I didn't even remember. I didn't even
Right.
remember that Najee Harris signed with the Chargers. There's just been so
Yeah.
much that's been going on. So got a lot of familiar faces and new places. I'm just excited to see how everything plays out with the draft, and we're going to be back at it with our own mock draft later this week.
Yeah. So we're gonna mock draft later this week. Completely change probably a lot of things based off of free agency and trades. Um, for our mock draft. So we're gonna see a lot more. I guess maybe a lot more QB heavy in the early first round. Maybe I don't know. We're gonna see what happens. But thank you everybody for listening. Chris and I are hopefully gonna be back a lot more frequently. So yeah, appreciate everybody listening and have a good week.